about that, but my sister more so than I do. They were like menacing. You know how you hear of cryptids like throwing rocks and things like that? These were like banging on the house.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Magical Journey Podcast. I am your host, Daniel Ian Cohoon, and tonight we have a really great episode for you.
Was all over the place. And so we'd always hear stories of like police being called and things like that. Cryptids. So we did have cryptid encounters. My sister had a pretty intense one. She went to the high school prom with the oldest son out there in the small town. After prom, they go back to the ranch. That you almost still can't talk to her about it. She's pretty frightened by that experience. And I do believe that involved one of these white fuzzies. I have a picture from the archives when I went to Dr. Sprinkles. I got all the original documents and drawings, and this was the drawing. And my mom called them white fuzzies because they were white gray-haired creatures. And it's interesting because Bob Sala said in Malmstrom they were soldiers seeing very similar creatures out there. So kind of different than your typical Bigfoot. These were light hair, gray-haired creatures out there. And what's interesting about the reports, and even I remember some things about that, but my sister more so than I do, they were like menacing. You know how you hear of cryptids like throwing rocks and things like that? These were like banging on the house, or they would watch from the barn area and things like that. So really strange. And then that strange encounter film in Beyond Skinwalker where those footprints come out bipedal. They were definitely bipedal. They had a large stride, came out of nowhere, walked, disappeared. And that was really interesting. So, my personal experiences, though, the most frightening night, it was the boys' mother's birthday. So we were all there at the ranch house. It was on a weekend. It was early in the morning after midnight. All the adults were in the front room of that ranch house playing like board games and me, my sister, and the three boys were in the boys' room, and that hum started up. I remember the hum because when everybody's like, oh my God. And then at that time, all the power in the house goes out, and there was a huge bright, like brighter than anything, light out of the boys' window. And we're all like, oh my gosh, flipping out. That's when that disembodied electronic voice came through like every orifice of the house. And the reason I know what it says verbatim is because it's in the briefing document. And when I did a recreation, it was like an electronic, and I recreated it to the best of my memory. And when my sister heard that, and she was like almost having a PTSD moment as well. But it basically said, attention, we have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Please do not cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends, meaning us, will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. And that's the quote, and it's in this document. And my mom and her boyfriend, I'm going to just say his name because they're no longer here, but his first name was Jack. They took that very seriously. And I can remember, trying to tell, I'm 9, 10, 11 years old during these years. So, in elementary school. And I had my good friends, Christy and Sandy, and I was trying to tell them, and, I lived in a very haunted house. I was seeing shadow figures and hearing footsteps and all that kind of stuff going on. And I'm trying to tell my friends, and I just remember them, I don't know, maybe they thought I was a little weird or out there. And I learned very quickly to kind of shut my mouth. And then, of course, with my parents, my mom saying, don't say anything about what's going on out there. Another interesting thing, we were out there, me and my sister, flipping the Frisbee. It was a, spring day in front of the ranch house. There was a wet, heavy snow on the ground, but the sun was shining. And we looked down, it was dry dirt in this large, perfect circle. And it's so weird. I mean, it's such a clear, vivid memory to me. It was so bizarre because it was dry dirt. I mean, remember kicking it with our feet and like, this is so weird. And then come to find out in the documents, there were two that APRO looked at two of these circles. One was in back of the ranch house and one was in the front. And they measured that circle at 75 feet in diameter, which is a very common circumference for these circles where nothing grows. So that was another experience. And then for me personally, me and my sister both had separate encounters as well. One time I was with the youngest son, and I was with Jack, and we were in the back of the pickup truck. And I remember going in back of the ranch house, and behind the ranch house is this huge forest of ponderosa pines. And in the front of the ranch house is kind of open. There's a pond there. I think you see it on Beyond Skinwalker where the landing site is and everything. But in the back of the ranch house is these ponderosa pines. There was a road. So we go, and there was this outbuilding. And Jack went and got something out, put it in the back of the truck. And he's like, well, let's drive you guys around, the back of the forest. And I just remember, I don't remember why he stopped the truck, but he did. And all of a sudden we hear this, like, it sounded like bees or an electric, like if you're under a power line, that kind of, and all of a sudden I look, and there was a box, and it was like this. And it was hovering off the ground. And I just remember Jack going, get in the truck, it's a box, it's a box, it's a box. And when Scott and I, we jump in the back of the pickup truck and take off. And I just remember looking back, and that box was gone. And that box was making tones. It was like illuminated from the inside. So, and then what was really interesting, and they didn't put it in the third season of Beyond Skinwalker, but the team had made the decision to have my sister go out without me influencing her for that. So she goes out, and she's walking around, and, for season 1, 2, and 3, we did film about my box encounter and where the box was, but it's never made any of the episodes because it just doesn't fit into they haven't talked about boxes at all. But they do have the footage. If it ever came up, they filmed it. But my sister, when we were walking out there behind the ranch house, she had a box encounter as well. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is where I had this box encounter. And the boxes were seen by several adults from many different places in the document. So it's just on and on. And then of course the boyfriend of the boys' mother at the time, who I suspect was with the military and was probably part of this. And the reason is because in some of these documents, he talks about experimenting with legal LSD. And we know with talking with whistleblowers that are in some of this MK Ultra programs, and even, in state hospitals and things, they were experimenting with what they called FM freaking magic, which was a combination of LSD and other drugs with some of these people. And it talks about different soldiers being on the property from Camp Carson. It said Warren blank from Camp Carson, felt something wrong. Something took over his mind, made him walk towards the woods, would release him, and he would run back to the ranch house, and did this to him 5 times. Sounds like MK Ultra. Something in the box that maybe it's the Black Axis military. So that's always been kind of my quest, I guess. If I have a quest, it's how much of this is paranormal in nature, and how much of it is, our Black Axis projects. And then the question becomes, well, which came first, chicken or the egg? Because this document right here, which is wonderful, it talks about, it's called The Choppers and the Choppers. If anybody's interested in getting a PDF of this, it's really a quick, really interesting read. Go to RockyMountainRanchResearch.org or katiepaige.net, and it's PAIG, and I'll send you the PDF if you just send me, and I'll send this to you. But this talks about all the blacked out choppers, and there's newspaper. I have a huge folder of, it's in the drawer down here, but huge thick folder of newspaper articles from back in the day. And some of these were these choppers, like menacing little kids on these ranches, and I'm like, what is that about? So many different things were going on out there, from cattle mutilations, and not just cows, but horse and dog, and people were panicking. And I mean, just everything, to the hums, to the bangs, which makes me think about underground tunnels.